Welcome to the Chilling Ghost Stories channel. Today we bring you a famous Chinese ghost story titled The Moonlight Mystery. If you enjoy the story, please give us a like and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you. Now let's get started. Chapter 2. The Footsteps in the Dissection Room. Autumn with its cool breeze and bright moon. It was well past the designated time for lights to go out, and Yè Xīn kept tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Finally, she managed to drift off, wondering, would she come again tonight? From the distant sky, a natural melody floated down, faint and difficult to recognize the instrument from which it came. The music slipped through the gap of the slightly open window, and Yè Xīn felt truly at ease. Suddenly, a flash of white light appeared, and a girl dressed in a white gown slowly stepped out from the blinding glow. Yè Xīn tried to focus on her face, moving closer. What she saw was a face mutilated, covered in blood. "You're here again? What do you want?" Fresh drops of blood fell onto Yè Xīn's face, and she screamed in terror, helpless. It was that same dream again. 2 months of military training had quickly passed, followed by a heavy schedule of schoolwork, which left Yè Xīn feeling utterly exhausted. On top of that, she had recently become a key member of the school's radio station, handling everything from interviews to editing and reading the news. But it wasn't just exhaustion that kept her up at night. It was the recurring dream that had been haunting her. After every terrifying dream, she blamed Ōu Yáng Shàng for telling the story of the 405 murder conspiracy. Maybe she had become too mentally strained, allowing fear to creep into her thoughts. Still, Yè Xīn was afraid to sleep, afraid of encountering that same image again. "Is this the person who controls my fate?" she thought, recalling her father, who had once been the head of a large factory, but had now become a hopeless gambler after retirement. On the other hand, her mother had risen from being an ordinary textile worker to become a well-known fashion designer. Ōu Yáng Shàng had said something recently that didn't seem right. People aren't like small grains of dust that lose direction when the wind blows. Humans are advanced creatures who can conquer their own instincts, and no ghost or demon can invade them. The more Yè Xīn thought about it, the more her fear seemed to dissipate. Gradually, she fell back asleep. Unfortunately, she wasn't the one in control of her dreams. The melodious music swirled around her, seemingly lifting her up into the clouds. The clouds contracted and expanded, and then a patch of moonlight appeared before her. "Who are you?" Yè Xīn felt she could hear the sound echoing from all directions. The girl placed a finger to her lips and whispered, then extended her hand towards Yè Xīn. When she was a child, Yè Xīn's grandmother had always warned her not to go near the riverbank, for drowned ghosts would reach up from the water and pull people down to their deaths. Was this girl the ghost of someone who had jumped from a building? Would she pull Yè Xīn to her death too? Yè Xīn felt an uncontrollable urge to reach out. Finally, she touched the girl's hand. It was cold as ice. Yè Xīn opened her eyes wide, wanting to see the girl's face clearly before they parted. But Yè Xīn was also afraid to see the blood-soaked face again. However, this time the blinding light gradually faded, and the girl's face became clearer. It was a pale, perfect face. It was the face of Ōu Yáng Shàng. "Ah!" Yè Xīn gasped in shock, but Ōu Yáng Shàng immediately covered her mouth with his hand. "Hey, it's me! Don't scream, or you'll wake everyone up!" Yè Xīn was horrified and immediately woke up from the nightmare, trying to make out Ōu Yáng Shàng's figure in the darkness. Ōu Yáng Shàng, who had been sleeping in the bed above, was now sitting right beside her. His pale face was directly in front of hers. "What are you doing? You scared me half to death!" Yè Xīn was still trembling, but Ōu Yáng Shàng was wearing a long white pajama, and his cold hand was tightly gripping hers. "I guess you thought I was the girl in your dream, right? The one with the bloodied face?" Ōu Yáng Shàng laughed, clearly amused. "You're such a scaredy cat. You're trembling like a mouse." "I'm not scared," Yè Xīn replied defiantly, though secretly she was laughing at her own fear. "You should try sitting next to Luo's bed. She'd scream and wake up the whole building." Ōu Yáng Shàng clicked his tongue. "I don't know why, but I couldn't sleep tonight. I noticed you were tossing and turning, so I guessed you weren't sleeping either. I thought I'd take you out for a walk, but it looks like you were already dreaming. Exactly, you woke me up. Are you happy now? It's the middle of the night, and I can't go out with you. I'm not part of your ghost soul group. Yè Ping, please, Ōu Yáng Shàng pleaded, knowing that she was easy to convince. Yè Ping, still shaken from her nightmare, agreed to go with him. But the door to the dormitory is locked. How will we get out? Ōu Yáng Shàng lowered his voice. I've scoped it out. There's a window at the corner of the staircase between the first and second floors. The iron bars are missing a piece, thanks to those students who stay up late to study. Anyone a bit heavier might not fit, but someone like you and me should have no problem. Outside the window is a ledge, and there's another window on the first floor water tank room. It's only about 1.5 meters from the ground. Ōu Yáng Shàng stood up and walked over to Luolu's bed, standing there for a moment before returning to say, Luolu is deep in sleep. We can go now. Under the moonlight, Ōu Yáng Shàng and Yè Ping walked a few laps around the athletic field, chatting about their class and joking about a few of the boys. Ōu Yáng Shàng suddenly pointed ahead. Let's go over there first, then we can head back, okay? If Ōu Yáng Shàng had said they were going to the anatomy building, Yè Ping would have refused right away. But it was too late, and before she knew it, they were standing in front of a small, old European-style building. They stood frozen, staring at the pale gray walls lit by the moonlight. Yè Ping shivered, feeling an eerie chill. Maybe I'm just underdressed and feeling cold. Let's head back. This is the holy site of so many ghost stories in our school, Ōu Yáng Shàng said casually, as though she hadn't spoken. She looked up at the building with a reverent expression, which sent a chill down Yè Ping's spine. You're awful. You tricked me into coming here for a ghost tour? I'm definitely telling your mom that her daughter is very superstitious. Yè Ping turned to leave. Ōu Yáng Shàng grabbed her and stopped her. People say all the ghost stories at the anatomy building happen after midnight. We rarely get a chance to visit at such a late hour. Don't you want to check it out? Don't worry, nothing's going to happen. Plus, we'll report to Taoist Master Chu that we've wiped out these superstitions that have haunted our school for decades. We've already progressed enough, right? Hing still didn't turn her head. If you're interested, just go ahead. Then the credit for getting rid of superstition will belong to you. I'm not going along with you. But, Shang didn't know what else to say, but she still tightly gripped Hing's sleeve. Suddenly, Hing understood. So you're just pretending to be interested, but in reality, you're scared, right? Shang pouted and said, I'm not scared of anything. What kind of friend are you? I've wasted so much time wandering around with you at night. I'll go in alone. Don't stop me. Seeing Shang still holding her sleeve tightly, Hing thought her good friend was stubborn, yet adorable. She had no choice but to relent. Fine. I don't know what good deeds I did in my past life to end up with such a mischievous girl like you in this life. All right, let's go in for a bit and come right back. The two of them carefully stepped forward, moving silently as if afraid of disturbing anyone. But in this building, who would they even disturb? Finally, they reached the door, and Hing softly said, Why is the door frame built so high? Shang replied, There are many explanations: to prevent water from flooding in when it rains, to stop phosgene leaks. But the most believable one is that it's to keep ghosts from running out. Hing clicked her tongue. If you keep spouting nonsense like this, I'll never believe anything you say again. You go first. Shang stopped. Hing could only shake her head and stepped up to the threshold. The two of them stared at the brass doorknob, standing still. You open the door. Shang's body trembled slightly. Hing shook her head again, grasped the doorknob, and opened the door. Before them was a pitch-black area. Shang turned on the flashlight she had prepared, but the light wasn't strong enough, only faintly illuminating a hallway. They stood frozen in place at the door. Shang opened her mouth to speak, but Hing cut in. You go first. Hing took a step forward, muttering, I knew it, Shang. I knew you wouldn't dare to go first. No sooner had Hing spoken than Shang jumped ahead, completely unfazed, as though no longer scared. She waved the flashlight around and called loudly, Where are you? My little sister has come to visit. Don't disappoint me. At that moment, Hing realized she had been tricked by the clever, mischievous Shang. Hing muttered in frustration, The way you're calling out like that, even if there are others around here, they'd be terrified and hide. Shang laughed. All right, I'll be a little more polite then. The flashlight suddenly went out, and everything around them became pitch black. Shang went silent. A cold gust of wind suddenly enveloped Yè Xīn, making her shiver uncontrollably. So this is what darkness can do to make someone feel terrified. Hing took a deep breath, but the chill didn't go away. Shang also didn't say a word. After a long silence, Hing had no choice but to speak. Hey, Shang, stop playing games. Turn the light on. Shang didn't reply. The silence around them was absolute. Where are you, Shang? Stop with the tricks. Hing's voice trembled. Still nothing. Hing was tortured by the feeling of loneliness and fear, each second dragging on endlessly. She was about to scream when a soft voice called out, Don't shout! Thank goodness it was Shang's voice. Don't scold me. I'm still listening carefully. It seems I can hear footsteps. Shang spoke quietly, but to Hing it sounded like thunder in her ears. What? Footsteps? Hing held her breath and listened. Yes, there was a heavy sound of footsteps, as though someone was walking outside the building, but it was getting closer. It was coming toward them. I hear it too, Hing whispered, unsure how much longer she could stay there. The footsteps grew closer, heavier, as though the person was walking through a muddy path, each step leaving deep imprints in the mud. Hing's heart pounded furiously. Who could walk like that? If they weren't normal, then what could they be? Should they just stand there forever? Quick, let's hide in the last room. Shang pulled Hing, and they both ran down the hallway. Shang turned on the flashlight again, and at the end of the hallway on both sides were two small rooms, with doors only half closed. At this point, Shang was still joking. Should we flip a coin to decide which room to hide in? Hing ignored Shang's rambling and immediately dragged her into the room on the right. But Shang wouldn't stop. Hey, Hing, it's just a simple decision between two choices, but it could have serious consequences if we make the wrong one. The room reeked of a stench so foul it burned their noses, but Hing didn't care about anything else, as she was too fixated on the strange footsteps outside the door. After they entered the room, Shang immediately locked the door. The footsteps suddenly stopped at the entrance to the building. It seemed like the person was hesitating, wondering if they should enter. Oh no! Hing suddenly realized that when they entered the hallway, they hadn't closed the building's door. That was like sending a signal that there were people inside. No wonder they were hesitating. The person was probably very familiar with this building, and when they saw the door open at midnight, they must have thought something was unusual. Who else could be so familiar with the place and have such heavy, strange footsteps? Could it be that the ghost stories circulating around the school for years were true? Could this small building really be a haunted place? The more she thought, the more terrified she became. Hing instinctively stepped back when suddenly a cold, stiff hand pressed against her cheek. No, it wasn't a human hand. It was a claw. Is it you, Shang? Hing whispered in desperation. Of course, it couldn't be Shang playing a prank. Shang was clearly standing right in front of her. Shang turned startled, then flicked the flashlight on. Hing saw Shang's face change quickly, and she immediately covered her mouth to keep from screaming. But Shang just laughed and smiled mischievously, and only then did Hing realize she had been tricked again by Shang. But when she turned around, she was once again horrified. A complete skeleton was pressing right behind her. It was a human skeleton model used for teaching, hanging on a metal stand. She had seen it once when she toured the anatomy building at the beginning of the school year. She hadn't expected to encounter it again tonight. The sound of footsteps rang out again, this time in the hallway. Hing had no choice but to pray quietly, hoping the footsteps would stop before they reached the end of the hallway. But the footsteps continued to draw closer, and the floor vibrated with every heavy step. Hing's heart raced. Finally, the footsteps stopped at the end of the hallway. Shang suddenly pulled Hing close and whispered in her ear, I think he'll flip a coin to decide which room to go into. Let's hide inside. Feeling a slight itch in her ear, it turned out that Shang was whispering into her ear. I'm sure this person, or this ghost, has realized we are around here. He then burned incense laced with sleeping drugs to make us faint. Perhaps he made those strange noises to torture us to death. We can't just sit here and wait to die. At least I want to see what he's doing or how this ghost plans to harm us. It was strange. After the extreme fear, Hing actually wanted to know the truth, even though this meant taking extreme risks or being even more frightened. Hing nodded. The cabinet door was cracked open just a little, and the two peered through. They were frozen in fear at the sight before them. The small room was not as dark as before. The west window was wide open, and bright moonlight streamed in, casting light on a hunched back. On this hunched back was a huge, shiny, bald head bending down, with a bed in front of him. There seemed to be a body, perhaps a corpse, lying on the bed. He was holding an electric saw, about to dismember the body. Hing and Shang seemed to cling tightly to the cabinet door, preventing themselves from falling out in fear. After their breathing slowed, they suddenly realized their hands were sticky. They lifted their hands to their noses and smelled the pungent, iron-like scent of blood. Fresh blood. The barrier they had built to hold back their terror shattered, and they both screamed. The hunched man slowly turned around. Despite being extremely frightened, Shang still remembered to turn on the flashlight and shone it on the man's face. He was a man in his 50s, with a fierce face and an expression of mild surprise. He spoke in a hoarse voice. "I didn't expect it to be two girls. To come all the way here, you're very brave." Upon closer inspection, it turned out that the old man was wearing a skirt made of rubber and rubber gloves, indicating that he was just a technician from the anatomy lab. "Now don't be scared. I'm just a technician, splitting this corpse into specimens. You girls are really sneaking around at midnight and hiding in this equipment cabinet. What's so interesting about that? All right, I won't ask what year you're in, or ask to see your student ID or a report from security. Go back and get some sleep." The old hunched man, fearing that he might frighten them more, initially spoke in a gentle tone. But by the end, his words and facial expression became much harsher, showing his displeasure with these uninvited guests. Shang cautiously said, "No wonder we heard such heavy footsteps, so it turns out you were carrying the corpse in here. Where did this corpse come from? Isn't that obvious? Of course it was from the morgue, from the #1 hospital. The distance wasn't far and it was just one corpse, so I carried it here. If there were more, I would have used a tricycle to transport them. What are you asking so much for? Hurry up and go. Do you know we're here in this building and guessed we're hiding in your cabinet? You must be a very organized person, right?" The old hunched man thought the two girls would quickly run away, but he didn't expect Shang to ask so many questions. He felt both annoyed and amused. "Of course, but how did you know?" Shang answered, "Because I guessed that you usually close the door, but tonight it was left ajar, so I figured someone must be inside, and I guessed that we'd be hiding here. When you saw the door to the room, which was only partially closed, you probably thought we had closed it tightly after we entered. That made you even more suspicious. When we hid in the cabinet, we were so clumsy that we messed up the clothes and tools you neatly arranged, so you must have known we were hiding in there. You also probably guessed we would peek out, so you smeared fresh blood on the door to scare us." The old hunched man sneered. "I didn't expect this girl to be so clever. You guessed it right. At first, I thought it was some mischievous boys, but I didn't expect it to be two students. The 90s are different. Times have changed, and girls these days are so bold." "You're overestimating us. It's just that we've been taught by Ms. Agatha Christie," Shang replied cheekily. "Could you tell us why you work at night? The room is dark. Why don't you turn on the lights and why burn incense? This building—" The old hunched man interrupted. "Can you stop already? I just got praised for being clever, but why don't you think this building has a lot of traffic and there's no basement? If I opened the body here during the day, would that be so nice to look at? Why would I want to work at night for no reason? I've asked the school many times to provide a relatively quiet and private place to work, but they're short on rooms and funds. The facilities here are all from 40 years ago, and why don't I like to turn on the lights when I work? It's just a personal preference. No need to drag on. Go back already. Even if you didn't say it, it's clear. You're afraid that if the lights are on, the corpses will recognize you, and the spirits will follow you forever. The incense is meant to ward off evil spirits. I've guessed right again, haven't I?" Shang continued, pushing him with a flurry of questions. Nonsense! The old man suddenly stood up, his eyes growing more fierce, his hand trembling slightly as he held the electric saw. I'm not going to do anything to you girls today. Just go, stop talking nonsense, got it? I'm trying to do you a favor, now go. Hing, feeling that Shang had gone a bit too far, pulled her hand. Let's go. Just as they were about to step out of the room, Shang turned back. Excuse me, I have one last question. I've heard there's a ghost in this building. Is that true? The old man immediately pressed the electric saw's button and shouted so loudly that it almost drowned out the noise of the saw. That's absolutely true. Tonight, I encountered a ghost, and that's why I ran into a chatterbox like you. Get out. The two of them ran slowly, and when they were almost out the door of the building, Hing suddenly stumbled. As she fell, she saw a flash of white light ahead. The figure of the girl in a white dress from her dreams quickly flashed by, and she faintly heard the words "Moonlight" whispered in her ear. Shang quickly helped Hing up, and Hing grabbed Shang's hand tightly, vaguely asking, "What is Moonlight?" Shang also felt confused. "What are you talking about?" The sound of slow footsteps came again from behind them, and the hallway lights suddenly turned on. The old hunched man was walking briskly toward them, his eyes almost popping out of his head. He reached Hing and put his hands on her shoulders, asking, "What's that you're mumbling about?" Hing seemed to wake up from her daze, shaking her head. "What? I didn't say anything." Shang said, "You just said," when suddenly a rough hand covered her mouth. She saw the old hunched man's face full of deep wrinkles, with a serious expression, and she fell silent. He spoke slowly. "No matter what day it is, after midnight, you absolutely cannot come here. Do you understand?" Hing nodded. Shang said, "Do you mean Hing can't come, but I can come often?" "Nonsense! You can't either!" The old man shoved them both toward the door. Shang asked again, "I've heard that if the windowsills are this high, ghosts can't leave the building. Now that we've reached the door, we're safe, right?" The old man didn't bother to respond, waiting until the two girls had walked a few dozen steps before coldly calling after them. "It's always humans who commit the most sins, not ghosts.